Founded in 2014, the Extraordinary Achievers' vision is to empower others to be the best version of themselves. The show is hosted by Chief Lady Waynette Peters, a multi-entrepreneur, empowerment speaker, confidence mentor, positive lifestyle coach, humanitarian ambassador, and a TV host. Lady Waynette is a holder of over 35 international awards for her humanitarian, philanthropic, and international empowerment contributions and holds 2 chieftaincy titles. Welcome to the Extraordinary Achievers Show.
Thank you for joining us to another episode of the Extraordinary Achievers Show, where we're covering community affairs and interests. Please do join us every Wednesday at 8 p.m. live on Facebook, YouTube, on our website, and several other social media platforms. We take this opportunity to thank the various admins of several Facebook pages that air us live on their pages. We would like to thank you for sharing on WhatsApp groups, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. We are truly, truly grateful. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our media team and all our administration members. For every share, I am grateful. To all our viewers, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, our website, I'd like to say a thank you and welcome to the Extraordinary Achievers Show. And if you have never joined us before and you're joining us for the first time, we would like to say thank you for joining us and do stay with us. We are now going to take a look at our social media advert.
For real-life stories broadcasted live on air, to please subscribe to our newsletter from our website. We will be honored if you could please like and follow our Facebook pages. Stay in touch and tune in by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Thank you for following us on our Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Tumblr, and TikTok. We are live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. GMT. Please do share with others.
Whilst we give you an opportunity to share this live broadcast with friends, with family, with associates and others, we would like to play a song from Anthony Everest entitled You Call Me Baby.
Oh, why don't you call me? When will you call me? Why don't you call me? I'm your only love. Hey, come now, free me. Hey, won't you lead me? Hey, I need you. Free from life, strife, and pain. Baby, baby, baby. Baby, baby, baby. Baby, baby, baby. Love is the highest. Love is the wisest. Love is the greatest. There is nothing above love. You call me baby, you call me baby, you call me baby, you call me baby, baby, baby. Baby, 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 baby,
That was the amazing Anthony Everest, a man I'm glad to call a friend, with an amazing voice, gifted and talented. And thank you for giving us that song for us to play on this show. The lady I'm about to introduce to you is a familiar face on the Extraordinary Achievers show. She has been a guest here before talking about women in power and women in charge. A woman I have great respect and admiration for. I always read her text messages and her WhatsApp messages smiling because I'm certain she was smiling when she wrote them. She's forever smiling. Her soul smiles as she speaks. We would like to welcome her back onto our screens. I call her Doc. You call her Mutoko Samson, a lecturer in social work. Mutoko, welcome back again on the Extraordinary Achievers show.
It is such a great honor. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you. Mutoko Samson is a South African qualified social worker and a lecturer in social work. Mutoko has worked for the ANC, trade unions, NGOs, social work, children and families, and has also worked with young people at the edge of care and adults. Mutoko Samson area of specialism is Family Group Conference, FGC, an approach that ensures family involvement before any decisions are taken for the welfare of the child. And she is currently finishing her PhD on the same subject of Family Group Conference. And today we welcome her back on the Extraordinary Achievers show. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Reverend Ebenezer. When I spoke to this gentleman for the very first time after being introduced to him by my good friend Mutoko, the warmth in his voice was amazing. The genuine humanitarian sound echoed from his voice. We are grateful to have him on the show. Reverend Ebenezer, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Reverend Ebenezer is a senior pastor of Christ Heart Church International in Dunstable. He's a social worker and director of Pathfinders Care Services Limited. He is an amazing man doing some amazing things that we're going to hear about shortly. Qualified as a social worker in 2008, he worked as a social worker in different local authorities and different teams, child protection teams, child in need teams, assessment teams, court teams, and looked after children teams. And today we are proud to have you, Reverend, on the Extraordinary Achievers show as we continue to introduce what you do. Reverend Ebenezer is the director of the International Help for Children, advanced child protection consultant in the UK, independent social worker, assessor for International Social Service, USA. He undertakes family assessments to reunite children with their families in the UK. He's the director of Pathfinders Care Services UK, which is a semi-independent provision for young people. General Overseer, Christ Church International 2019. Reverend Ebenezer is the director of International Help for Disabled Children in Ghana. They support disabled children to gain access to educate, promote positive outcomes for these children. They support the children and their families financially, supporting them with their health and accommodation needs to give them equal opportunities to thrive and to achieve their life goal and objections that they are looking for. We welcome you on the Extraordinary Achievers show today, and we thank you, Reverend, for taking time out. Thank you, Reverend, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to hearing more about your humanitarian work later on in the show. Thank you. We would like to introduce you next to our next guest, Towela Ngambi. Our next guest is one extremely humble woman I've had the privilege to be blessed with being a friend, and we have become more acquainted on the Sound Mind WhatsApp group, which is run by Sir K. Kola himself. An amazing woman. Her friendly nature is next to none. Her beauty and intelligence are her middle names. And I would like to say, Bestie, welcome on the Extraordinary Achievers show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Tawela Ngabi is a chartered psychologist, a psychology lecturer, qualified teacher, assessment moderation in leadership, and a member of the Division for Teachers and Researchers in Psychology. Tawela is the principal lecturer for the Institute of Foundation Studies at Aden University in the UK. Tawela's teaching experience spans over 25 years within the pupil referral units, secondary schools, further education, and HE. She has also worked in various social care establishments and been engaged in projects which enhance access to employment and education. Tawela is a chartered psychologist who uses her skills to educate others about how psychology touches on all areas of life, including marketing, relationships, teamwork, child development, family, diet and fitness, mental health, human resources, and much more. Her favorite quotation is, "If you deliberately plan on being less than you are capable of being, then I warn you that you'll be unhappy for the rest of your life." I'll read that again. It says, "If you deliberately plan on being less than you are capable of being, then I warn you that you'll be unhappy for the rest of your life." Thank you. And thank you for giving us that quotation. I have been using it as my slogan for today. Thank you. Thank you. We will be back with you shortly. And now we're going to say some welcome to some guests that we have that join us this evening. Thank you. So we would like to go to the comments. Please keep on sharing this live program with others, and please comment. We look forward to your comments. Melissa says, "Good evening, wonderful people," and good evening to you. Seke says, "Hello, everyone." Seke from Sound Mind, an amazing man. Sound Mind is on Facebook. Please check it out. And Kelsey PK says, "Good evening." Good evening, PK. And Patrick says, "Hey all," and "Hey to you." Jason Appleyard says, "Evenings," and how amazing to have you on the show. We know you're so busy, so having you on the show is a great honor. Simon C. Brown says, "Good evening, my dear friend," and good evening to you, my darling friend. And Bandy says, "Looking forward to another empowering show." And we thank you. We know we're going to get some amazing comments from you. Aramarum, the composer, says, "Love, love, love." And he is known by the name Anthony Everest, the singer. And welcome back onto the show. Mr. Bami Collie Roberts, a significant member in our community that works on a number of youth projects. Good evening to you, and thank you for joining us. And Bethany says, "Good evening," and good evening to you, Bethany. Thank you for joining. Joyful Praise, with the amazing angelic voice. She also has her own TV show that she has. Please check out her page. Good evening to you too, sis. And Elizabeth says, "Good evening," and good evening to everyone on the platform, and good evening to you, and thank you for joining us. Pastor Liz, good evening to you. Thank you. We would like to welcome your comments as the show is going on. Most importantly, there's someone else that needs to hear this. It might be for them, it might be for a relative, it might be for a friend, it might be for someone else. Please do share. Back to the program. We appreciate that there's a considerable number of children that require social services, assistance, and intervention. Today, however, we are flipping the coin to look on the other side of that coin. We also believe and are of the understanding that there are parents that require support on how to manage situations of bullying from their children. How can the system assist these parents? What is our advice to those families, and how can family relations be improved? Today, we are talking about living in fear of the children. There are some parents that are being terrorized by their children at home with social services, or "I will ring the police." And there's some older children that are past the social services, but are still bullying their parents at home. We would like to know, how can they receive support? The first question we are going to ask is, we are going to go straight on to Reverend Ebenezer. Reverend Ebenezer, this is a question that we pose to you as a social worker and as an individual that has passion in this area. How can we manage situations of bullying from home?
Thank you very much, Gwyneth, for the question. I just want to start by saying that there are a lot of parents living in fear of their abusive and violent teenagers or children or young people. And there is, as you said, there is clearly lack of support for some or most of these parents who are living in fear. One of the reasons could be that there is lack of understanding of adolescent violence towards their parents. Now, the important thing to bear in mind here is that sometimes these children and young people would want to hold their parents hostages in terms of wanting to scare them that, if you do this, I'm going to call social services, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And that becomes a problem. And that leads to a lot of violent situations in the house where children sometimes could be abusing their parents or their primary caregivers. They may sometimes humiliate their parents or their primary caregivers with very threatening and abusive languages, damaging property sometimes. Sometimes they can take money from them, extort money from them, stealing, and all that. This is not obviously right. And as we are here today to talk about what sort of support are there or available to support some of these parents who may be going through this unfortunate situation, I would begin by saying that sometimes the children will weigh up the parents and see whether there's scope for them to put fear in them. Now, if as a parent, if you have not really done anything wrong and your child is threatening you that I'm going to call the police or call social services, I guess you should not be so much afraid because you have not really done anything wrong. But then if there are issues at home, then possibly that could obviously create a lot of anxiety for you as a parent. Now, I know there are a few local authorities where there are a range of support for parents who come out to say that they are going through some form of abuse from their children or teenagers. But these services are very limited. There are services where some local authority provide mediation services between the child and the parent to help them to work around whatever the issues may be or where, to try and strengthen the relationship, to make things better at home for these families. Unfortunately, there aren't many of these support services. And that, to me, is a clarion call to us as Black and ethnic minority social workers or professionals to be able to try and create some support services for families or parents who might be going through this rather unfortunate situation. There seem to be some charity organizations that help with providing support for parents who might be going through this, which I might give the information maybe at the close of this program. But as a church, what we sometimes do is that we do organize some parenting programs for parents who may be able to come out and share whatever they're going through. We support them. We give them some parenting strategies that hopefully when they try, they are able to make some changes or differences in the house. We also provide some sort of mentoring support for some of the children or young people who may have challenges because of peer pressure, because of link to gangs and other things. And for that reason, they are giving problems or being abusive to their parents. Some of them, it could be lack of appropriate or male role models at home. So we do have services in place where we can allocate some children to or young people to those mentors to help them so that they will stop abusing their children. There's also other counseling facilities that some local authorities or some voluntary organizations do provide for parents who may be going through this situation.
Thank you, Reverend. You've touched on a lot of points there. We're going to break them down as we go along to go back to them so that our viewers and our audience are able to keep up with us. and all the viable information that you've given us. So you have said, yes, that will be assessed. And if parents are at home and they're in fear of hearing of child services being called or the police being called, they should fear not if they know that they have not done anything. You've also told us that as a church and as a reverend of a church, you do offer some family management and family coaching services that you do offer, and we appreciate you. We take note of that. We would like to go back and ask you the question, how do you assess when children contact you that it is the children and the children are not actually lying on their parents, or they are not fabricating or making it more than it is and they just don't want to listen? How do you manage that situation? How do you assess that situation?
Well, I think that, thank you very much, Winnet. I think there's a whole assessment framework which we use in assessing when the referral is made to social services. We have the assessment triangle, which we use to look at environmental factors, the child developmental needs, and other factors, the child obviously being in the center of this assessment. It is important to listen to the children. Their views, wishes, and feelings are crucial to every assessment. So you don't go into a family just having the pre-formed judgment that this child is lying. It is not good practice. You need to have an open mind when you are doing an assessment on the family. Now, as a social worker and also a pastor, I've had situations whereby I have done a few assessments where I realized that the issues that were, or the referrals that came in, some of the issues were actually cultural issues. They were nothing like the child was being abused or a child not being fed or not being food and all that at home. Now, from my background, I'm able to put things more into perspective. If I go into a family home where, I'm doing an assessment, some social workers would, when they open the fridge, for instance, and there's no food there, they might conclude that this child is being starved. No. Where we come from, for instance, I am from Ghana. Sometimes you even hardly would find food in the fridge. So I would not conclude that, this child is being abused because there's no food in the fridge. So you need to really put things into context and perspective when you are engaging in assessments. Another example is I had a colleague who was doing an assessment of a family where the family was undergoing a parenting assessment, and the social worker was concluding that this family or this the parents were not eating at the dining table with this child. So they were concluding that the family hasn't got the right parenting skills. But judging from where I come from, in context to where I was socialized, I never had the opportunity of sitting at the dining table or something with my family. So you cannot conclude that my parents, therefore, they don't have the right parenting skills. It's just because that is not how we were brought up. That is not how we were socialized. So I'm just saying this because in doing assessment, it's important to look at the cultural perspective of things, have an open mind and being able to assess the situation properly. Otherwise, you might end up concluding, making conclusions that may not be really appropriate. So I think that is what I would say. Go into the family, have an open mind. Don't make judgment because it's the black family, the child is naturally being abused. No. Speak to the child, have one-to-one session with the child, do direct work with the child. And if really something is happening in the house, as a professional, you'll be able to pick it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend. And on this occasion today, we're going to refer to both Black and other children as well. And I assume that is something that works throughout. Thank you. If you just joined us, we have been listening to Reverend Ebenezer. Ebenezer is a qualified social worker in 2008, and he works in social work in different local authorities and different teams, child protection teams, child in need teams, assessment teams, court teams, and he looks after children's teams. We thank him for being on the show. We are now going to welcome back onto our screens Mutoko. Mutoko, welcome back onto our screens. Thank you. Mutoko, we are going to ask you this question. As a social worker, and in your experience, how can the system support parents?
It is, thanks, Lady Wynette. And this is, I worked a lot. There was a team in my CV. I worked in the team where we're working with the children at the edge of care. So that team, we worked with families where they were ready to let the children go for whatever reason. So first of all, if you need, it's becoming widely recognized now that this is an existing problem. It used to be a narrative that in the family home only children can face abuse. We have not looked at it the other way, that parents too could be subject to abuse by their children. So it is becoming more recognized. There are many more, at least more resources now where we know that we can work with families who are experiencing this. Before you start helping the family, as the Reverend has kindly stated, you need to understand what you are dealing with. What is the source of the problem? Sources of this issue are many. It could be a parenting issue. It could be a family responding to a change. Maybe parents have split up and the young person in the family is unable to deal with it. It could be somebody who has mental learning disabilities, and maybe children who are on the spectrum. So when you're on the spectrum, sometimes the behavior may seem like you are a child who cannot do certain things, whereas sometimes it's the parenting of the child with a disability. So sometimes you work with families who see this child who has a disability and then decide to treat them like an egg and not give them any boundaries. So every child needs boundaries. So sometimes it's a parenting issue. As I said, the reasons are complex. And once you understand the reasons, the causal factors for all this, then it's easier for you to know what you're dealing with, because it may be interrupting the behavioral patterns. It may be empowering the parent and empowering the child, and then having services that are going to see that they can be mediated, because the relationship at times get really, really tested. And I've seen this. I've seen children who are very abusive towards their parents. But there is nothing that needs to stop us from looking at that issue as a child. This is a child. So once we remember we're dealing with a child, there's nothing we cannot do to address the situation. And when we're dealing with a child, we know this is not a child who's going to remain a child, because childhood is temporal. So whatever support you're putting in place, it needs to be geared towards holistically supporting the child and the family, whilst not condoning what the child is doing in the family, but we still need to see them as a child, and whatever we're putting in place, it needs to be supportive in nature, so that there will be a way forward for this child, because we cannot condemn a child and say, you've done this, go to maximum prison. We need to look at how we can address this, but the core of all that is understanding day one. How did it start? How did we get here?
Amazing. And thank you so much, Doc. Thank you for that. If you have just joined us or you did not hear the introduction of Mutoko, Mutoko is a qualified social worker and lecturer in social work. I call her Doc, as she is just finishing off her PhD in the same group of work. She specializes in family group conference, an approach that explores and ensures family involvement before any decisions are made taken for the welfare of the child. We would like to ask you this question. Toyin asked the question, do these children have special needs and mental illnesses? And I think Toyin is referring to the children that we are referring to. Do they have special needs or mental illnesses? How does it differ where children have special needs and mental illnesses to children that are maybe delinquencies? And I would like to just add a note to our viewers. We are not saying that every child that calls social services or the police is lying. We are talking about the children that are playing the system in order that they can get away with what they want to get away with. But since that question has been posed to us, we are now going to ask you from Toyin, how do you look at the differences? Is there a way that you look differently from children with special needs to children that don't have special needs?
It is complex, because even if a child has special needs, they still need to be parented. They still need to be parented as any other child, but bearing in mind that there are certain things that you need to understand about this child because of their special needs. So that is why I was saying earlier, sometimes it's about the parenting of a child with a special need. The special need itself or on its own may not be the biggest issue here. The special need may have been that from the time this child was younger, we used to say, oh, we know her, she has a special need, and then not put boundaries in place. And every child, if you don't give a child boundaries, they pay for them, and they want them, they will take them from you if you don't give them boundaries. So even if a child has disabilities of some sort, sometimes they may be on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, it does not mean that that child cannot be parented. It may just mean that there are certain behaviors that you deal with differently, because you know they are not being naughty. It's just about trying to express themselves. But it could be that as any other child, they still need to have boundaries. We've seen in the shows like the Channel 5 show by Dr. Laverne Antropas, you can see some of the children with the needs they have, you still see her putting things in place for the parent to be able to give the child boundaries, because without those boundaries, even the illness itself becomes difficult for a child, because you're saying, oh, you have a special need, do whatever, jump wherever, and it does not work like that. So even if a child does have special needs, even if a child is grieving, even if a child is dealing with an issue, you still need to have boundaries in place, and that's the bottom line.
Thank you for answering that question. We have another question for you that will come up on our screens shortly. And this is from another viewer. And the question is from Seke Kola Adene, the CEO of SoundMind. And they're doing some amazing things with SoundMind internationally. An amazing group to be part of. SoundMind is on Facebook, and there are also some WhatsApp groups, and I'm part of the UK one, and it's totally amazing. I highly recommend it. The question from Seke says, at what stage do you decide to investigate an abuse?
Okay, I'm sure my sister Tawela will come from a different perspective, because she is in the psychology field. But for us, as soon as we become aware there is a problem. And that is why when we, just to put this into perspective, when you're working with an approach like family group conferencing, as soon as you hear there is a problem, you involve the whole family. And this is the same thing as with a child who is exhibiting some behavior that is very violent towards either the sibling or the parent or towards everyone. And sometimes these behaviors are varied. At home, they may be like that, and then they go to school, they are as good as gold. So we need to investigate as soon as we become aware. Why do we do that there? Because we may still investigate this and offer support at a lower level because issues have not escalated. But you find that parents feel like they cannot do that. Sometimes they cannot tell us as social workers. I'm sure Reverend we will add to this, because they don't want to shock their children. They don't want social services to know their problems, because sometimes through genuine fear of thinking, if I tell social services, then they will take the children away. But now with the resources becoming more and more, you get more people who are able to say, well, there is a service that can help you. There is somebody who can give you some kind of advice. Maybe sometimes the advice you need is behavior modification or other interventions, but we need to investigate as soon as we hear the problem exists so that we will be able to come in with interventions in a timely manner.
Thank you. We're going to ask you this last question for now. And the question is, as a parent, if a parent was to pick up the phone and ring social services and says, I am a parent of a child that is abusing me at home, and can you give me information on where I can get help? Do you start investigating to try and find out if the child is okay at home and be on the child's side, or do you go on the parent's side? How do you assess that situation?
As with any other, and I'm sure Reverend will add to this, as with any other referral, we need to find out, where does this come from? What made you pick up the phone and call social services? So it may be that we walk in and we see, and we have seen this, you walk in, the walls are full of holes because the child has been so violent. There are knife marks on the door. There is everything. So we want to find out what is happening. How did we end up with a child who is doing that? Is the child okay? Is the parent okay? What about other children in the family, because they too could be victims? So that's why I was talking about a holistic assessment. The holistic assessment does not mean that we are going to take anybody away, but it only means that we are concerned. We need to know, as Reverend talked about the triangle, we need to know that everyone in this family is okay. Once we understand that, it's easier for us to move forward with an intervention plan, because now we know what's going on and what support the family needs as a whole. And as Reverend said, the voice of the child is very important. I worked with a child who was very violent towards the mother. The father was in prison, and I just could not understand. She, at some point, she just lost it all. She seemed like she just became a different child overnight. And then when I started working with her, I found out that particular day when you walked in, it like a bomb had hit the house. She had broken down every piece of furniture in the house. And when I sat down with her, just took her into the car, we went for a drive, and when you ask them what to eat, they always choose McDonald's. And we sat outside McDonald's. It was a nice summer day. And she said, I got very angry because last week I asked my mom for new trainers. She couldn't give me trainers. She couldn't buy me trainers. And I found out that she is going to visit my father in prison, who is in prison for abusing me. So if you have money to visit him, give me my trainers. So you understand now that you need to go into a lot of family therapy there to address those layers of hate that exist within that family. So that's why it is important for us to understand first what's happening and to know that you are dealing with a child. So whatever this child has done, right now you could come in and say, you've trashed the house. But you have to remember, this is a child who was abused by the father, and the mother is going to prison to visit the father and couldn't buy her trainers. So we need to acknowledge those levels of hate within that family.
That's an outstanding example that you've just given us there, that the child is acting out because of something else that has happened. And it's a very good example that you've shared with us. Thank you, Lecturer Mutoko. Thank you so much. We will be back with you. We are going to read some comments. Thank you for sharing this program. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for all your hellos. We thank them and we're grateful. Simon C. Brown says, some of these children have undiagnosed disabilities and their behavior is caused by the child and not understand why they're different to others. I ran a charity several years ago that supported families that have a child or children with FASD. Our helpline was constantly busy with parents wanting to know how they could support their abusive child's behavior towards them as parents. Simon, it will be very good for you to give us a follow-up of what advice did you give those parents? Thank you. Sekei says, Reverend Ebenezer, thank you for your detailed explanation. Abdion and oh, hey, bro. And spoken to you in ages. Thank you, Mr. Paseda, for joining us today. And Mr. Paseda runs a charity, a service for the disabled, and it is a charity worth looking up. Thank you for joining us on the show today. Bethany says, Canada looks at domestic abuse that includes children towards parents and children towards children within their home environment. I was learning about this during my social work degree program in Canada in 2003. And thank you, Bethany, for joining us from Canada. Ahali, thank you once again for joining us today. Good evening, all, she says. Such a great topic this evening. As a community, we need support and to support parents, as parenting is not easy. We shouldn't judge. We should just provide support. And thank you. Simon says, children with special needs have to be parented differently, but sometimes need strict boundaries, as this helps them as they become an adult. Simon says, boundaries are a must. Thank you. Mtombi, hey, Han, and nice to see you back. The amazing woman with the amazing essential oils. She's one person to hook up with too. She says, a great topic, and thank you. And Olu Israel, thank you for joining us today. She says, we need to be honest and know when to get help at the right time. That's very true. We need to be honest and know when to get help. Simon says the child could be abusive because they're crying out for help, but doesn't know how to ask. So their behavior gets out of control. And Motara04 says, it's good to see my tutor Mtoko sharing the knowledge on a wider platform. She's amazing, right? She's totally amazing. Thank you for your comments. Keep your comments coming through. And questions, please, to our panel will be much appreciated. Any comments that you have for them in agreement, anything else that you can add tonight. The Extraordinary Achievers Show is our show. We are the Extraordinary Achievers, for we are trying to achieve a community that comes together, working together and talking about some of these topics that are dear to our hearts. Some are sensitive and some we don't talk much about them. And we thank every single guest, an industry expert, a coach, a lecturer, a doctor, every industry expert that joins us on this show. We are grateful for their time. We are going to welcome back onto our screens Tawela Ngambi. Tawela is a chartered psychologist, a lecturer, a qualified teacher in assessment duration in leadership, and is a member of the Division for Teachers and Researchers in Psychology. We welcome you on to the show again. Tawela, thank you. Tawela, as a chartered psychologist, when you say you use your skills to educate others about psychology in the areas including that of child development and family, can you tell us, in the context of tonight's program, how would you go about doing just that?
So what I've heard from my other two colleagues, or the other panelists, or guests on the show, goes in line with our studies in psychology. So in psychology, we see it very much as a science where we've tested these interventions that are being used within social work. So one of the theories I was thinking about today was social learning theory, where a child learns how to behave from their environment. And I do like that both guests talked about assessing where this problem might be coming from. And in psychology as well, we look at where does this problem come from. And yes, somebody also pointed out boundaries. And indeed, in our research, we found that children who have boundaries do much better if they have boundaries much earlier on in life, they do much better as they proceed during the teen years, where a lot is happening even in the brain, where they're taking further risks because the prefrontal cortex, which is a part of the brain in the front, has not developed wholly. So you see that in psychology, we look at all those reasons, but also we offer support to the parents, saying, look, if we feel that this intervention, for example, rewards and punishment, which are all part of the boundary setting, and children, being able to being able to face their consequences, those are the areas we talk about within psychology. So, for example, looking at this particular case, so when a child is exhibiting behavior which is violent, it's saying to the parent, what's happening there then? What can you do not to reinforce this behavior? What can you do not to reward this behavior? So if somebody wants you to be fearful, you can actually reward them by being fearful. So what are you going to do differently to disrupt this behavior, for them not to think that you are actually rewarding them? I mean, it goes without saying we can teach people how to treat us. And I think even within a family setting, and I do appreciate it's very, very difficult, and I'm looking at it very scientifically, but you can teach someone how to treat you. And that's where I suppose as psychologists we start from, and we very much merge with the social sciences or the social workers, in terms of we also believe that boundaries need to be set. That's one way the child can be conditioned into being able to air their views, being able to work through their issues. I think somebody talked about it's a cry for help, and I do actually believe it's often a cry for help. So what can I do as a parent, or as it takes a village, really. It's not just up to the parent. It takes a village. So what can we do to ensure this young person is able to voice their frustrations without resorting to violence, because that's something maybe they've learned growing up. And I think that's the perspective where we would come from as psychologists. So not very different, as my sister said earlier. It's not very different. It's not a very different view. It's a very scientific view, but with emphasis on how can we use that science to improve on this child's behavior.
Thank you. Tawela, thank you, Principal Lecturer for the Institute and Foundation Studies at Aden University in the UK. We do have a question for you from one of our viewers. Before we go to that question that we have for you, I have a question for you. Now, we're talking about intervention here, and we're talking about the early stages, and I think that is more or less where you've all been singing from this evening. We're talking about, put boundaries in place and do this and do that and do that. Most situations that we do find in life and in families is that all those things had not been done before. So a child is now at 15, is now at 16. They never had any boundaries before. A child maybe is even at the age of 10, 12. Boundaries were not enforced before, but boundaries are being enforced now because things have got out of hand. What do parents do at that moment in time? Because they didn't have the boundaries at the age of 5. The children were free spirits, and they ran a free-spirited home. In all measures in life, there were no boundaries. Now, let's look at that for a second. What happens? What should parents do?
So it needs to start from communication, is what I believe. And also the parent, don't be afraid to be unpopular. And sometimes when family breaks down, both parents feel a guilt there, and they might be very, very tempted to be rewarding behavior just because there's been a family breakdown. So don't be guilty. You haven't done anything wrong. As a parent, you haven't done anything wrong. This is the child's behavior. So when we get, I'm going back to my teaching days now, and when we used to get children into pupil referral units, they had to learn a new way of doing things. We can all learn a new way of doing things. So I wouldn't want parents to be discouraged because it wasn't something they did before. You can start now and put a plan of action in place and explain to the child, things are going to change. This is what we're going to do. Obviously, there'll be that conversation. What is it that you're not happy with? And also, when you are having that conversation, look at the behavior or focus on the behavior rather than the child. I think somebody pointed out, you've got to remember this is a child. So don't focus on the child and finger point. You know, you're this, or name calling. You're so violent. I think that's something to veer away from and focus on the behavior. I hate it when you break the doors down in the house. I'm actually really frightened when you do that. Therefore, these are some of the things I'm going to do. And of course, the child will resist, and they will push those new boundaries that you've set. And I think that's where the support comes in place. I love it that the church, the reverend that came on earlier, talked about all the support that they give. So I mean, that's where you would call on the support of others. And you also need to disengage somewhat when the child starts behaving that way. And a simple, when you stop, we can talk about it. However, I'm going out. And you know, it's just there are many of those interventions, and I'm sure my social work colleagues also have many more. But anyone can learn a new way of doing things, and you can reward that behavior as well. Oh, I love it. We've not had an incident for 2 days now. It is something you could be saying. It does take time and it does need patience.
Thank you. Now to the question from one of our viewers. Toyin asks the question, do all members of the family get a psychological support? Would, in terms of where children and the parents are concerned, would you just give that support to the child? Do you also give the support to the parents? Do you give the support to the whole family? I think would be Toyin's question there.
Absolutely, the whole family would need to be engaged with. So ordinarily in counseling psychology, or where family therapy is involved, just like my colleague said, it has to be triangulated. You have to speak to all parties involved, and you have to intervene in, you give one party one sort of intervention, and you give the other one, why don't you try this? And you set up some sort of smart target both. But it's everybody that's given that support. Remember, these sorts of situations cause a lot of anxiety, and invariably mental health issues do start coming up. There can be some depression there. So everybody, including the other members of the family, there could be young children, there could be other members of the family that also need to be that also needs to be involved or be given that psychological support. Thank you.
Thank you, lecturer. Thank you. Thank you very much for that input. We are now going to read some comments from some of our viewers and audiences. We thank you for your comments. We thank you for your questions. We thank you for your interaction. Yeti says, good evening. What a great topic. Thank you all, and thank you for joining us. Professor Rotimi, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Oh, we've got June babies on the show today. And Professor, a former guest on Extraordinary Achievers, a very humble being, one of the best in town. I highly Salute to you, Professor. Professor says, parenting starts from day one. The irony is that we're not taught parenting. Our source of our parenting skills is multifactorial. Thank you. Olu Israel, nice to see you on the show, says, tell them, Sister Ella, tell them. Simon C. Brown says, if the abusive is happening to any parent, if any abuse is happening to any parent, they need to talk to someone, a family member, friend, pastor, social worker, etc. As talking about it is the start of getting support. Parents then don't feel like they have failed their children. And that is a very good point you make, which is that when a child starts acting up, most parents feel that they are to blame. They look at themselves as to blame for the child's mistakes or the child's behavior. But in some cases, it is the child's choices. Thank you. Noxie, hey Queen Noxie, and that is an amazing influencer that's doing so much on TikTok, Instagram, anywhere, YouTube. Every time I flick on something, she's on there. You're doing an amazing job, Noxie, and I love you to bits. Noxie says, I feel like there should be some parenting courses available because it's not always easy. Now, that is a great point that Noxie makes, because most parenting courses and most parenting coaching are available at an expensive, extortionate rate. We really need something in the community, and I am going to appeal to the social workers and everyone in social care that I think we need to look at it and what we can provide, even if it was just advice. And that's a great point. Professor Rotimi says, how our parents brought us up, how neighbors parented, infants are of their needs and can push boundaries to get this, has the need to set reasonable boundaries. Very true. Bangi says, shame and fear can prevent parents seeking the help they need and end up minimizing what is actually an incredible serious issue in somebody's home. That is very true. The thought of being judged for most parents is there. That's the reason why we're talking about it today, because so many parents are going through abuse from their children at home, and we need to talk about it. We need to unite everyone. It's not only you, it's not only them. Many parents are going through this. Simon C. Brown says, reward good behavior and not bad behavior. This is not about giving a physical gift. It's sometimes about saying well done and giving the child one-to-one time with you, the parent. Professor says, children abusing parents or siblings is a reflection of not setting the boundaries between the right and wrong. Boundaries should be set with the explanations as to why and with love. Patricia Bailey, an amazing member in our community who we're looking forward to having on the Extraordinary Achievers show soon. She says, remember, hormones have a big part to play. Children grow and they mature. As a parent, we need to understand this and talk to our children and send them messages to talk to family members for support. Children can and will get better. Patricia Bailey says, positive energy. That's right. Positive energy. Bangi says, my question is, do children become violent because they want to gain power and control over their parents? Now, let's just stop there and ask this question to Reverend Ebenezer. Ebenezer, are children trying to gain power and control over their parents?
Well, thank you very much, Winnet. I think there are a whole range of factors that could be attributable to that. It may not just be to gain power and control. Some children, yes, may want to gain power. They want to be in control of situations. But then sometimes it is also could be attributed to some of these children may have experienced all forms of violence at home as well, or domestic abuse themselves. They may have been exposed to it. So they want to sort of sometimes live by what they've seen and heard, and they try to actualize it. So we end up seeing some of these children abusing their own parent because that's what they've seen. That's to them is normality. They've seen mom or dad shouting at each other and all that. So, and hitting each other and all that. So, to them is the normality. Some of them don't see anything wrong with these sort of things. So yes, sometimes they also want to sometimes some children would act out because they want to be heard. Some of the children may be left by themselves on their own, they are sort of fending for themselves, and sometimes they get all sort of peer pressure influence where they link up with the wrong people, wrong associations, and then unfortunately they come home and they try and become very difficult and challenging to their parents. There's also an element of a bit of, I think my colleagues have, Toko and the other colleague have spoken about mental health and disability. It could also be a form of some of the children may have some sort of needs, learning difficulty, mental health needs, and all that, and that to some extent also, they may not do that willingly, but then sometimes it happens that they may become a bit challenging in that sense, or abusive to their parents. So there's a whole range of factors which could be attributed to that.
Thank you, Reverend. Whilst you're on the screens, we're going to read a couple of comments together with you from our viewers. And the first comment, which comes up on our screens, is from Jude. And Jude says, "This is a great topic. Good evening to you all, and thanks for this amazing knowledge." So thank you for tuning in, and we appreciate you. And Mighty Munya is the individual that introduced me to Mutoko. Mutoko introduced me to Ebenezer. Now we're a whole one big family. And he says, "Yes, awesome host, and these ladies are very knowledgeable. We appreciate you. Ladies, you are appreciated." And Ola says, "Child abuse is not acceptable. It needs to stop. We need to use wisdom when dealing with children." And thank you, Ola. And Samuel says, "Some children are abusive to their parents because they're being bullied at school, college, or university, and they feel embarrassed about telling someone. So they let their anger on the people they love," which in this case, we're talking about letting out their anger onto their parents. Reverend, can you tell us the work that you're doing in Ghana in a very snapshot, a 60-second snapshot? Please tell our viewers. And in the meantime, one of our administrators is going to put some links in the comment box on the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much, Winette. I am the Director of International Health for Disabled Children in Ghana. We work or support disabled children in Ghana, to support them with their health needs, educational needs. We are trying to put up or build some schools and villages or houses for them in Ghana to be able to give them a better life, and obviously provide them with some sort of education. And we also want to, the charities want to provide support to parents for some of these disabled children, so that they will be able to feed or fend for the children, and obviously educate the parents and the community, because some children are being ostracized from their communities, and that is not right because they are disabled children. So we are trying to educate some of these parents to understand that a child having disability is not because of any spiritual or whatever. Sometimes people attribute these things to spiritual things, which may not necessarily be. So we are trying to educate these families or these parents so that they can support their children appropriately. Thank you very much.
Reverend Ebenezer, we thank you so very much, and thank you for taking time out to be on the show today. In another snapshot message to parents at home, specifically for parents at home, what would be your advice to parents that are going through abuse from their children? And we already know, we've already spoken about putting boundaries in place. And this is a question I'm going to ask all our panelists today. So giving them a heads up to be ready. We've spoken about boundaries and putting boundaries in place. We have addressed rewarding them with thank yous, gifts sometimes, but the acknowledgement of their good behavior. We've talked about that, but we want to know, in terms of the support mechanism that is out there, what are your words that you would like to share with parents that are going through abuse today?
I'd want to say to parents who are being abused by their children or teenagers that if you're worried about your safety, if you're worried about your life and the life of other people in your home or your community or your family, please don't suffer in silence. Step out, ask for help, seek for help. There's a lot of support available, as we have just said. Social workers are not your enemies. They are there to help you. They are there to assess and provide you with the right level of support that you need to be able to parent your children. So please step out, speak to someone, and don't feel stigmatized by coming out to speak out. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And Reverend Ebenezer's contact details are in the comment box below. And if you'd like to get in touch with anyone else at any other time, please do contact us as well. And remembering that you have a church service in Dunstable, and that's at 11 a.m. Is that correct? Every Sunday?
It's 9 a.m. to 11.
9 to 11 a.m. every Sunday. And those details will be in our comment box below. We thank you for taking time out today and sharing your views, and thank you for being amazing. Please do stay with us. We will be back with you shortly. We are now going to go to lecturer, my doc, Toko, and for her to share her views. Doc, when it comes to parents that are going through abuse, once again, what is your direct message to parents besides everything else that we've covered today?
With everything else, you need to tell someone. And saying, my child is abusive. I can imagine, I'll rather say my husband is abusive than my child is abusive, because it seems the world is ready for that. But when it's a child, it's too much of a taboo. Please tell someone. Seek help. There are resources available in different areas. Many support groups, there are blogs online. I think one of them is called Holes on the Wall. It was started by Helen Bonnick, who has done a lot of research on children who are abusive towards their parents. Talk to someone, seek help, and if you take longer to seek help, you will take longer to help your child, and in that way, that behavior will get more embedded. Tell someone, just find someone you can trust and say, I have a problem. Name it. Name it as a problem. Don't say the child is naughty. Name it. What do you call it? What do you call it when a child is abusive towards you? That is abuse. So name it, give it a name, because once you label it, it's easier for you to know what you're dealing with when you're asking for help.
So name it, label it, identify what it is, come to terms with the abuse that you are going through with that child. Acknowledge that you need help and assistance, and that is very, very important. Now, you've reassured parents at home that if they were to ring social services are now realizing that there is an issue that needs to be resolved. There is something that needs to be put in place in protection of parents too. So we thank you for that. And we are going to put your email address up. So if there's any parent out there going through any abuse, and if there is anyone that knows anyone that is going through any abuse, we are going to put your LinkedIn and your Twitter up onto our screens, and so that we have got someone that can be in touch with you, and you can give them some advice or put them through the right direction that they need to go through. You're an amazing woman, and I totally and truly appreciate your wisdom, your friendliness, and your love. We're going to read this comment that's come up from Norma Ellis. Podcaster Norma says, yesterday I saw a video of a young girl that made a sexual video, and her father with his friend stripped her naked and beat her to an inch of her life. That was worse than her making the video. And we acknowledge that comment from you, Norma. And as we were saying earlier, and as you will agree, Doc, that we are not saying that parents are not going through something with their children. On the other flip side of it, that children are in cases in a vulnerable situation at home, and they should not stop ringing so that they might feel that they're not believed. They will be believed. And I think you reassured everyone. I would like you to say that statement again, that you assess it as a whole unit. Could you just end with that, with those words, please?
When there is a problem in the family unit, you don't just walk in and take the child out and say, oops. You have to come in and look around and say, how did we get here? So in doing that, you're assessing the whole system. You're assessing the parents, the environment, the school, everything that the child has to deal with, so that you know what you're dealing with. And that is why it is important to tell someone, so that we can do that assessment and know sometimes the help takes 6 weeks, but it changes your life. So just bet on social services instead of leaving it unchallenged.
Thank you. Mutoko, lecturer Mutoko, my doc, our doc, thank you so very much for your time today. And do stay with us until the end of the show.
Thank you.
We are now going to go to another amazing woman and a lecturer for the Institute Foundation Studies at Aden University in the UK, Tawela. Tawela, once again, thank you for having to have joined us on the show today. And what is your advice specifically to parents, please?
Yes, for parents, what I want to say is, first of all, do not feel guilty. That guilt will eat at you. Don't feel guilty. You have done nothing wrong, so don't feel guilty. It's the child's behavior. Secondly, look after yourself. You can only give out of what you have. So all the mindfulness, treatments you can get, taking a walk, eating well, looking after yourself, minimizing your stress in that way will help you think a lot more clearer. Exercise, all those sorts of things. You really need to look after yourself. And as my colleagues have said, make sure you get the help that you need. There's so much help out there. There's SoundMind, forgive me for my plug, but there's lots of support out there. There's groups such as parenting groups online. There's family therapy. There's church. There's social workers. You need to reach out, because it takes a village to raise a child. You really need to reach out. It's nothing to be afraid of or guilty about or embarrassed of, because what you're doing is you are helping your child, and nothing should ever make you feel ashamed because you want to help your child. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tawela, and the birthday gay. Happy birthday to you. Looking forward to the drinks this weekend, and we are going to read some comments up on the screen. Abangi says, children are a gift from God and our heritage, and as parents we should pray for our children all times. Praying parents empower their children. Very true. Bangi also says, a praying family is a happy family. Speaking positive words upon our children's lives is vital. And Melissa says, this has been such an intriguing session. I took a lot from it. Thank you. And it's nice to hear that from a millennium. And Momo First says, great show. God bless you all for the wonderful service rendering to the public. And thank you for taking time out to join us. Bojan says, great advice. And thank you for joining us. Lydia says, thank you so much for the advice. And Lydia, thank you for joining us. Norma, podcaster Norma says, it works both ways. Child abuse parents and parents abusing children. We acknowledge that, podcaster Norma. We acknowledge that it's working both ways. And we acknowledge that there are so many systems in place for the child. And today, we just wanted to take a look at what's there for the children and what for the parents, and how can parents be supported at these times. And as we very well heard from our lecturer, Tawela, who is a principal lecturer for the Institute of Foundation Studies at Aden University in the UK, and she said to us that there are websites out there, and so did the other guests say that there are other ways that we can look up information. So we would like to thank you. Toela, thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for joining us on the Extraordinary Achievers Show today. Thank you. As we looked at our topic, and we're looking at how can parents be supported when they are the victims from their children. We appreciate you for taking time out on this topic. I myself looked earlier up onto on Google, and I found that there were also free parenting services that are run by different councils and different institutes in all and around communities. So please do look them up for you or for someone else, or for someone that you feel needs them, and please share the information. It will be such a great honor if you can share this program for today with someone else that can help someone else that can help someone else. We would like to say thank you for joining us. We are live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. on multiple social media platforms. Please do join us as we face and we explore some of the challenges that we have in our communities, and also celebrate some of the goodness that comes from our community. We look forward to welcoming you again Wednesday at 8 p.m. and every Wednesday at 8 p.m. For today, we would like to say have an amazing time, and thank you to the Extraordinary Achievers team, the media production team, and the administration team. I appreciate you greatly. May God bless you. Thank you to our panel. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your support, and especially for encouragement. Every comment of hello, we did see them. Because of time today, we did not manage to go through all of them, but we're grateful. I'm grateful. Thank you for your time, and good night.
Thank you for watching. You can now follow us on Facebook and subscribe our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and comment.